Some promises we make to ourselves become prisons. For 26-year-old Emma Collins, her vow to wait for true love had become both her shield and her cage. She believed in fairy tales, in the kind of love that made your heart skip beats and your soul feel complete. She believed that somewhere out there was a man who would love her completely, who would cherish the gift she had guarded so carefully her entire life. But fairy tales don't prepare you for men like Alexander Kane. When Emma walked into Kane Industries as a junior marketing coordinator, she thought she was just starting a new job. She had no idea she was about to meet a man who would shatter every belief she held about love, desire, and herself. Alexander wasn't the prince from her dreams. He was something far more dangerous. He was real, dark, commanding, and impossibly magnetic. Alexander Kane didn't ask for what he wanted. He took it. And from the moment his steel-gray eyes met Emma's across that conference room, she became his obsession. He saw through her professional facade, past her carefully constructed walls, straight to the innocent heart she'd been protecting all her life. Emma thought she knew what she wanted. Alexander knew what she needed. This is the story of how a woman who had saved herself for love discovered that sometimes the most profound surrender comes not to the man you choose, but to the one who chooses you. It's about the thin line between protection and prison, between waiting for love and being claimed by it. Some stories begin with a kiss. This one begins with a look that changed everything. Emma Collins adjusted her blazer for the third time as she stepped off the elevator onto the 32nd floor of Kane Industries. The marble floors gleamed under the morning sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, and she felt distinctly out of place among the expensive suits and designer heels clicking purposefully past her. Her reflection in the polished elevator doors showed a young woman trying too hard to look professional. The navy blazer was borrowed from her roommate, slightly too big in the shoulders. Her brown hair was pulled back in what she hoped was a sophisticated bun, though rebellious strands had already begun to escape. She clutched her portfolio like a lifeline, reminding herself that she had earned this position fair and square. "Miss Collins." A crisp voice cut through her nervous thoughts. A woman in her 40s approached, her blonde hair in a perfect chignon, wearing a dress that probably cost more than Emma's monthly rent. "I'm Patricia Wells, Mr. Kane's executive assistant. He's ready for your orientation meeting." Emma's stomach dropped. "Mr. Kane? I thought I was meeting with the marketing director, Mrs. Henderson." Patricia's smile was polite, but distant. "Change of plans. Mr. Kane likes to personally meet all new hires in the marketing department." She turned and began walking at a brisk pace that Emma had to hurry to match. "A few things you should know. Mr. Kane values punctuality, directness, and results. He doesn't appreciate small talk or excuses. When he asks a question, answer it completely, but concisely." They passed through an open office area where dozens of employees worked at sleek desks, the atmosphere quiet but intense. Emma caught glimpses of expensive artwork on the walls, modern sculptures placed strategically around the space. Everything screamed success and power, making her feel smaller with each step. "He's been known to make snap decisions about personnel," Patricia continued, her voice dropping slightly. "Some people find him intimidating, but he's fair. Just remember, he built this company from nothing. He has little patience for anything less than excellence." They reached a set of imposing double doors made of dark wood and glass. Patricia knocked once and waited for a response before opening the door. "Miss Collins to see you, sir." "Send her in." The voice was deep, rich, and carried an authority that made Emma's spine straighten involuntarily. She stepped into the office, and Patricia closed the door behind her with a soft click that felt final. The office was enormous, taking up what had to be a corner of the building. Two walls were entirely glass, offering a breathtaking view of the city below. The furniture was modern but warm, dark wood, and leather that spoke of success without being ostentatious. Awards and photographs lined one wall, documenting the rise of Kane Industries from a small startup to a marketing empire. But Emma barely noticed any of it, because Alexander Kane was standing with his back to her, looking out at the city, and even from behind, he commanded the entire room. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his charcoal suit perfectly. His dark hair was slightly longer than was fashionable for a businessman, touching his collar in a way that suggested he didn't care about conventions. When he turned around, Emma felt her breath catch. Alexander Kane was devastatingly handsome, but not in the safe, conventional way she'd always imagined her future husband would be. His face was all sharp angles and strong lines, with a jaw that looked like it could cut glass. His eyes were a striking gray, the color of storm clouds, and they fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel exposed. But it was more than his looks that made her pulse race. There was something about the way he moved, the way he occupied space, that spoke of a man who had never encountered a situation he couldn't control. He was power personified, and Emma felt like a moth suddenly, aware of just how bright the flame was. "Miss Collins." He didn't smile, but his voice carried a warmth that his expression didn't. "Please, have a seat." She settled into one of the leather chairs across from his desk, trying not to notice how he remained standing, studying her with those penetrating gray eyes. The silence stretched for a moment too long, and Emma felt compelled to fill it. "Thank you for taking the time to meet with me, Mr. Kane. I know you must be very busy, and tell me why you want to work here." His interruption was smooth but firm, and Emma realized this wasn't going to be a typical getting-to-know-you conversation. She straightened, drawing on the confidence that had gotten her through college and her previous jobs. "I've followed Kane Industries since I was in marketing school. The Delacroix campaign you ran 3 years ago completely revolutionized how luxury brands approach digital marketing. The way you integrated traditional elegance with modern accessibility was brilliant." For the first time, something shifted in his expression. "Interest, perhaps. Go on." Most marketing firms focus on either the aspirational aspect or the attainable aspect, but never both simultaneously. You found a way to make luxury feel both exclusive and inclusive, which shouldn't be possible, but somehow worked perfectly. Emma found herself leaning forward, her nervousness replaced by genuine passion for the subject. The brand saw a 60% increase in sales among millennials while maintaining their traditional client base. It was masterful. Alexander moved around his desk, and Emma was suddenly very aware of how close he was. He leaned against the edge of his desk, arms crossed, studying her face as she spoke. "You studied the campaign extensively. I wrote my senior thesis on it, actually. Well, on the broader implications of dual market positioning in luxury marketing. But your campaign was the primary case study. And what conclusion did you reach?" Emma hesitated for a moment. This felt less like a job interview and more like an oral exam. But there was something in his tone that made her want to impress him. That the future of marketing isn't about targeting demographics anymore. It's about understanding human psychology on a deeper level. People don't just buy products. They buy into stories about who they want to be. "And who do you want to be, Miss Collins?" The question caught her off guard. It was personal in a way that seemed inappropriate for a job interview. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw genuine curiosity rather than professional courtesy. "I want to be someone who creates those stories," she said honestly. "Someone who understands what people need, even when they don't know it themselves." Something flickered across his face. Approval, perhaps, or something deeper. He was quiet for a long moment, studying her with an intensity that made her feel as if he could see straight through her carefully constructed professional facade. "You're not what I expected," he said finally. "What did you expect? Someone older? More experienced? More?" He paused, seeming to search for the right word. Hardened. Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I may be young, Mr. Kane, but I'm not naive. I understand how business works." "Do you?" His voice was soft, but there was something in it that made her pulse quicken. "Business isn't just about campaigns and strategies, Miss Collins. It's about people. About understanding what drives them, what they fear, what they desire most." He pushed off from his desk and moved closer, stopping just outside what would normally be considered appropriate personal space. Emma caught a hint of his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her think of dark nights and dangerous choices. "What drives you, Miss Collins?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that Emma wasn't entirely sure how to interpret. She felt as if they were having two conversations, the surface one about marketing and business, and another, deeper one that she wasn't equipped to navigate. "I want to succeed," she said, her voice smaller than she intended. "Everyone wants to succeed. What do you want beyond success?" Emma stared up at him, feeling trapped by his gaze. There was something about the way he was looking at her that made her feel seen in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. She had the distinct impression that he was asking about much more than her career goals. "I want to matter," she admitted, the honesty surprising even herself. "I want to create something meaningful, something that lasts." Alexander nodded slowly, as if she had just confirmed something he already suspected. "You'll be working directly with my team on the Morrison account," he said, his tone shifting back to business. "It's a luxury hotel chain that's been family-owned for 3 generations. They're looking to expand while maintaining their boutique appeal." Emma blinked at the sudden change in direction. That's a major account." "Yes, it is. Patricia will send you the background materials. I expect your analysis and initial recommendations on my desk by Friday." "Friday? But that's only 3 days. Is that a problem?" His eyebrow raised slightly, and Emma realized this was a test. "No, sir. Not a problem." "Good." He moved back to his desk, but his eyes never left her face. "One more thing, Miss Collins." "Yes. I don't believe in coddling new employees. You'll be expected to contribute at the same level as people who have been here for years. If you can't handle that, it's better to know now." Emma stood, smoothing her skirt and trying to project more confidence than she felt. "I can handle it, Mr. Kane. We'll see." His smile was slight, but somehow knowing. "Patricia will show you to your desk." She turned toward the door, then paused and looked back. Alexander was watching her with that same intense focus, and for a moment, the air between them seemed to crackle with something indefinable. "Thank you for the opportunity," she said. "Thank you for being interesting," he replied, and Emma felt her cheeks flush again. As she walked toward the door, she heard him call her name one more time. "Miss Collins." She turned back, hand on the door handle. "Welcome to Kane Industries." The words should have sounded professional, welcoming. Instead, they felt like a promise of something much more complicated. As Emma left his office, her heart was racing and her mind was spinning. The Morrison account consumed Emma's every waking hour for the next 3 days. She arrived at the office each morning before 7 and stayed well past sunset, poring over market research, guest reviews, and financial reports. The luxury hotel chain was indeed a family business, started by Jonathan Morrison in 1952, and now run by his granddaughter, Victoria Morrison Blake, who was fighting to maintain the company's boutique charm while expanding to new markets. Emma found herself fascinated by the challenge. The Morrison hotels weren't just accommodation, they were experiences. Each property was unique, designed to reflect its location while maintaining an unmistakable Morrison elegance. The Seattle location featured local artwork and Pacific Northwest cuisine, while the Charleston property embraced Southern hospitality with modern luxury. The question was how to scale this personalized approach without losing what made Morrison special. On Wednesday evening, as Emma sat at her desk surrounded by research materials and empty coffee cups, she became aware of someone approaching. She looked up to find Alexander Kane standing beside her desk, his suit jacket gone and his sleeves rolled up. Even disheveled, he was impossibly attractive. "Working late, Miss Collins." It wasn't a question, and Emma realized that most of the office had emptied hours ago. The cleaning crew was moving quietly through the space, and the sun had long since set beyond the windows. "The Morrison account is fascinating," she said, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I want to make sure my recommendations are thorough." Alexander picked up one of her research folders, scanning the notes she had made in the margins. His proximity made her acutely aware of the warmth radiating from his body, the subtle scent of his cologne mixed with something distinctly male. "What's your initial assessment?" Emma straightened, slipping into presentation mode despite her exhaustion. Morrison's strength is their authenticity, but it's also their limitation. They're trying to replicate something that can't be replicated, the personal touch of a family business. What they need is a way to scale intimacy. Interesting. How do you scale intimacy? The word hung between them, and Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks as she realized the double meaning. But Alexander's expression remained professionally interested, so she pressed on. "You don't scale the intimacy itself. You scale the capacity for it. Instead of trying to make every Morrison hotel feel like the original, you make each one feel like it belongs exactly where it is, to the people who live there. Alexander set down the folder and leaned against her desk, his attention entirely focused on her. Explain. The Charleston Morrison doesn't try to be the Seattle Morrison. It becomes the definitive Charleston hotel, created by people who understand Charleston intimately. You hire local designers, local chefs, local artists. You don't export the Morrison experience, you translate it. That would require a completely different approach to management and marketing. Yes, it would. It would mean giving up some central control in favor of authentic local expertise. It's risky, but it's the only way to grow without losing what makes them special. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, studying her face with that intense focus that made her feel as if she were the only person in the world. You understand that this approach could fail spectacularly. The alternative is certain mediocrity, Emma replied. Morrison hotels will become just another luxury chain, distinguishable from their competitors only by thread count and marble quality. They'll survive, but they'll lose their soul. Something shifted in Alexander's expression, a spark of something that looked like admiration. You're not afraid of failure. I'm more afraid of not trying. He straightened, and Emma immediately missed his proximity. Finish your report. I want to see your complete recommendations tomorrow. I thought the deadline was Friday. It was. Now it's Thursday. He started to walk away, then paused. And Miss Collins? Yes. Don't stay too much longer. The building can be unsettling at night. There was something in his tone that made Emma look around the empty office with new awareness. But when she looked back, Alexander was already walking toward the elevators, leaving her with the strange feeling that he had been concerned about her rather than simply giving professional advice. The next morning, Emma arrived at the office to find a coffee waiting on her desk. Not the generic office coffee, but something expensive and perfectly prepared, still steaming in a ceramic cup that definitely didn't come from the break room. A note beside it read, "Fuel for Excellence." AK. She looked up to see Alexander's office, but his door was closed and she could see him through the glass walls, already on a phone call. The gesture was thoughtful, personal, and completely unexpected from the commanding businessman she had met just days ago. The coffee was perfect, rich, and smooth with just a hint of sweetness. As she worked on her final recommendations, she found herself glancing toward his office, trying to understand the contradiction that was Alexander Kane. The man who had intimidated her with his intensity had noticed she liked her coffee with cream and sugar. The executive who demanded excellence had cared enough to ensure she was caffeinated for the task. Emma submitted her report at 11:30, well before the unofficial deadline. Patricia accepted it with a knowing smile that made Emma wonder if the coffee delivery had been witnessed by more people than she realized. An hour later, her desk phone rang. "Miss Collins, Mr. Kane would like to see you in his office." Emma's heart began to race as she made her way across the floor. Through the glass walls, she could see Alexander reading her report, his expression unreadable. When she knocked, he gestured for her to enter without looking up. "Have a seat," he said, still focused on the document in front of him. Emma sat, trying to read his reaction from his body language. He was perfectly still as he read, occasionally making a note in the margin with an expensive-looking pen. The silence stretched until Emma wondered if she should say something. But, just as she was about to speak, Alexander looked up. "This is excellent work." Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by pride. "Thank you. Your analysis of their current brand positioning is insightful, and your recommendations are both creative and practical." He set the report aside and leaned back in his chair. "But I'm particularly impressed by your understanding of the emotional component of the brand." "The emotional component?" "You wrote here that Morrison hotels don't sell rooms. They sell the feeling of being somewhere special, somewhere that understands you." He quoted from memory, and Emma realized he had studied her report very carefully. That demonstrates an understanding of human psychology that goes beyond marketing theory. Emma felt a flush of pleasure at his praise. "I think people are hungry for authentic experiences. Everything feels manufactured now, focus grouped, and optimized. When someone finds something real, they're willing to pay for it." "And what feels real to you, Miss Collins?" Again, The question felt more personal than professional, but Emma found herself wanting to answer honestly. Moments when people drop their masks, when they stop trying to be what they think they should be and just are. Alexander's eyes darkened slightly, and Emma felt that electric tension that seemed to accompany their interactions. And when do you drop your mask? The question caught her off guard, too intimate for the professional setting. But Alexander was looking at her with such intensity that she found herself considering an honest answer. I'm not sure I know how, she admitted. Something flickered across his face, surprise, perhaps, or recognition. Everyone wears masks, Miss Collins. The question is whether they're protecting you or imprisoning you. Before Emma could process what he meant, Alexander's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and his expression shifted back to business. I need to take this, but I want you to present your recommendations to Victoria Morrison next week. Patricia will set up the meeting. Emma stood, still feeling off balance from their conversation. As she reached the door, Alexander called her name again. Emma. She turned, and something in her chest fluttered at hearing her first name in his voice. Excellent work, he said, and his smile was warm in a way that made her feel like she had just won something important. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation for the Morrison presentation. Emma refined her recommendations, created visual materials, and practiced her delivery until she could present the entire campaign without notes. But underneath the professional activity, she found herself increasingly aware of Alexander Kane. He seemed to be everywhere, passing her desk with a nod and a small smile, joining meetings where her input was requested, appearing in the break room when she was grabbing lunch. Each interaction was brief and professional, but Emma began to feel as if he was paying attention to her in a way that went beyond typical boss-employee dynamics. On Friday evening, as Emma was packing up her materials for the weekend, she noticed that Alexander's office light was still on. Most of the floor had emptied, and she could see him through the glass walls, still working. Without really thinking about it, she found herself walking toward his office. She knocked softly on his door. Come in. Alexander looked up as she entered, and Emma noticed that he looked tired in a way that made him seem more human, less intimidatingly perfect. I wanted to thank you for the opportunity with Morrison, she said. I know you could have given it to someone with more experience. Alexander leaned back in his chair, studying her face. Experience isn't the same as insight, Emma. You see things differently than people who have been doing this for decades. How do I see things differently? You see the emotion underneath the strategy. Most marketers focus on what people buy. You understand why they buy it. Emma felt that familiar flush of pleasure at his praise. But there was something else in his tone, something that made her pulse quicken. You're working late again, she observed. So are you. I was just leaving. Were you? He glanced at her hands, still full of files and materials. It looks like you're taking work home. Emma looked down at her armload of Morrison materials and realized he was right. I suppose I am. When was the last time you did something just for yourself? Something that had nothing to do with work or getting ahead or proving yourself. The question was so unexpected that Emma found herself really considering it. When was the last time? She couldn't remember a recent evening spent reading for pleasure, a weekend without some sort of professional development activity, a moment when she wasn't thinking about her career or her goals or her carefully planned future. I don't remember, she admitted. Alexander stood and moved around his desk, coming to stand closer to her than was strictly professional. That's a problem, Emma. Why is it a problem? Because you can't understand other people's desires if you don't understand your own. His voice was low, intimate in a way that made Emma's breath catch. They were standing close enough that she could see flecks of silver in his gray eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from his body. What do you desire, Emma? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that Emma wasn't sure she was ready to explore. She felt as if she were standing at the edge of something vast and dangerous, something that could change everything about her carefully ordered life. I should go, she said softly, but she didn't move. Yes, Alexander agreed, but he didn't step back either. They stood there for a moment that felt suspended outside of time, both acknowledging the current running between them while neither willing to name it. Finally, Emma forced herself to step back. Have a good weekend, Mr. Kane. Alexander, he corrected. And Emma? Yes. The Morrison presentation was scheduled for Tuesday morning in the largest conference room on the 32nd floor. Emma arrived early, setting up her materials and testing the presentation technology twice to ensure everything would run smoothly. She had chosen her outfit carefully, a charcoal gray dress with a structured jacket that made her feel professional and confident, paired with heels that added just enough height to command attention without appearing aggressive. Victoria Morrison Blake arrived precisely on time, accompanied by her head of operations and chief financial officer. Victoria was an elegant woman in her early 40s, with silver-touched auburn hair and intelligent green eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She carried herself with the kind of confidence that came from growing up knowing she would one day run a multi-million-dollar company. Alexander entered the room just as Emma was greeting the Morrison team, and she felt that familiar flutter of awareness at his presence. Today he wore a navy suit with a crisp white shirt and a silver tie that brought out the gray in his eyes. When he looked at her, she saw something that might have been encouragement or perhaps possession. "Victoria, I'd like you to meet Emma Collins, the strategist who developed the campaign we discussed," Alexander said, his hand briefly touching Emma's lower back in a gesture that felt both supportive and claiming. "Emma, Victoria Morrison Blake. Ms. Morrison Blake, it's an honor to meet you," Emma said, offering a firm handshake. "I've been fascinated by Morrison Hotels since I started researching your brand. What your family has built is remarkable." "Thank you. Please, call me Victoria. I understand you have some thoughts about our expansion strategy." "I do, and I think you're going to find them interesting." Emma launched into her presentation with confidence, walking the Morrison team through her analysis of their current brand position, their competitors, and the challenges of scaling a boutique experience. She explained her research into successful expansion models, the psychology of luxury hospitality, and the evolving expectations of affluent travelers. But the heart of her presentation was the concept she had developed: authentic localization. The Morrison experience isn't about having the same amenities in every location, Emma explained, using the smartboard to illustrate her points. It's about feeling like you're staying somewhere that could only exist exactly where it is. Your Seattle property succeeds because it feels authentically Seattle, created by people who understand what makes that city special. Victoria leaned forward, clearly engaged. "But how do we maintain quality control if we're not standardizing the experience?" "You standardize the principles, not the execution. Every Morrison hotel should make guests feel like they're experiencing something genuine, something that reflects both Morrison excellence and local character. But how that manifests should vary dramatically based on location." Emma walked them through her proposed expansion strategy, showing how Morrison could enter new markets by partnering with local artists, designers, and cultural experts. Instead of imposing a Morrison template on each location, they would translate Morrison values through local voices. For example, a Morrison hotel in New Orleans wouldn't just serve good food. It would celebrate the unique culinary heritage of New Orleans through the lens of Morrison hospitality. The art wouldn't be generic luxury hotel art. It would showcase local artists working at the intersection of traditional New Orleans culture and contemporary expression. "That sounds expensive," the CFO interjected. "Custom design for every property, local sourcing, unique programming. How do we maintain profitability?" Emma had anticipated this question and was ready with her response. "The investment in authentic localization actually creates better margins long-term because it creates true differentiation. Morrison hotels won't compete on thread count or square footage. You'll compete on uniqueness. Guests will choose Morrison not because it's the best luxury hotel in town, but because it's the only place where they can have that particular experience." She showed them case studies of other hospitality brands that had successfully implemented similar strategies, along with projected financial models that demonstrated how authentic localization could justify premium pricing while creating stronger guest loyalty. Throughout the presentation, Emma was aware of Alexander watching her intently. Unlike the Morrison team, who asked questions about logistics and implementation, he seemed more interested in watching her handle the room, seeing how she responded to challenges and adapted her message to her audience. When she finished, Victoria was quiet for a long moment, studying the materials Emma had provided. "This is not what I expected," Victoria said finally. Emma's heart sank. But Victoria continued before she could respond. It's better. Most marketing firms want to help us become more like our competitors. You're suggesting we become more like ourselves. Victoria looked around the room at her team, then back at Emma. The question is implementation. How do we actually execute this strategy? That's where the real work begins, Emma admitted. It requires a fundamental shift in how Morrison approaches expansion. Instead of finding properties and retrofitting them, you need to start with understanding each new market deeply before you even look for locations. Alexander spoke for the first time since the presentation began. Emma has outlined a comprehensive implementation plan that addresses exactly those concerns. Perhaps we could schedule a follow-up meeting to discuss the specifics? Victoria nodded, clearly impressed. I'd like that very much. Ms. Collins, this is exceptional work. You've given us a framework for thinking about our growth that feels both ambitious and true to who we are. As the Morrison team gathered their materials to leave, Victoria approached Emma directly. I hope Kane Industries appreciates what they have in you. This kind of strategic thinking is rare. Thank you. That means everything coming from you. After the Morrison team left, Emma began packing up her presentation materials, riding the high of a successful pitch. She had handled every question confidently, had seen the moment when Victoria understood her vision, had felt the electricity of presenting an idea she truly believed in. Well done, Alexander said, approaching as she closed her laptop. Thank you. I think they really understood the concept. Victoria Morrison Blake doesn't impress easily. She's turned down proposals from every major marketing firm in the country. Alexander moved closer, and Emma felt that familiar awareness of his presence. How does it feel? How does what feel? Success. Real success, not just checking boxes or meeting expectations. How does it feel to see someone understand your vision? Emma considered the question, surprised by how personal it was. It feels like being seen, she said honestly. Like proving that the way I think about things has value. And what do you want now? There was something in his tone that made Emma look up sharply. Alexander was watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken, and she had the distinct impression they were no longer talking about marketing campaigns. What do I want? You've just demonstrated that you can succeed at the highest level. You've proven that you belong here, that your ideas have value. What comes next, Emma? Emma felt as if she were standing at a crossroads, aware that her answer would determine more than just her career trajectory. I want to do work that matters. I want to create things that have impact. And personally, what do you want for yourself? The question hung between them, loaded with implications that Emma wasn't sure she was ready to explore. She was acutely aware that they were alone in the conference room, that his attention was entirely focused on her, that something fundamental had shifted in their dynamic. I don't know, she said honestly. I think you do know. I think you've always known, but you've been afraid to want it. Alexander moved closer, and Emma felt her breath catch. There was something different in his demeanor, something that went beyond professional interest or even personal attraction. He was looking at her the way a predator might look at prey, but there was nothing threatening about it. Instead, it felt like recognition, as if he saw something in her that she had been hiding even from herself. What do you think I want? She whispered. You want to stop being careful. You want to stop planning every moment of your life. Stop choosing the safe path. Stop protecting yourself from disappointment. His voice was low, intimate. You want to know what it feels like to surrender control to someone strong enough to handle it. Emma felt heat flood through her at his words, because they were true in a way that terrified her. That's a dangerous assumption to make about someone you barely know. I know more about you than you think, Emma. I know that you've been in relationships that felt safe, but never exciting. I know that you've never allowed yourself to want something just because you wanted it, not because it made sense or fit your plan. He paused, his gray eyes searching her face. I know that you've been waiting your entire life for someone to see who you really are. And who am I really? The question came out more breathless than she intended. You're a woman who craves intensity, but has convinced herself she wants stability. You're passionate and intuitive and brave, but you've been hiding behind career goals and careful plans because it feels safer than admitting what you really need. Alexander reached out and touched her face, his thumb tracing along her cheek in a gesture so intimate that Emma felt her knees go weak. What you really need is someone who won't let you hide from yourself. Alexander. She started, but she wasn't sure what she was going to say. Have dinner with me tonight. The words were simple, but Emma understood they represented something much more significant than a meal. This was Alexander Kane asking her to cross a line, to step away from the professional relationship that had felt safe into something that would change everything. I don't think that's a good idea, she said, even as her body was saying yes to his proximity, to the heat in his eyes, to the promise of something she had never allowed herself to want. Why not? You're my boss. This is complicated. Everything worthwhile is complicated, Emma. The question is whether you're brave enough to want something that doesn't come with guarantees. Emma stared up at him, feeling as if her entire carefully constructed life was balanced on this moment. She thought about her plan to wait for the right kind of man, the safe kind of love she had always imagined for herself. Alexander Kane was the opposite of safe. He was intensity and complication and desire that felt too big for her experience. But he was also the first person who had ever seen her so clearly, who had challenged her to be more than she had imagined she could be. Emma stood in front of her closet at 7:15, surrounded by rejected outfits and growing panic. Everything she owned suddenly felt wrong for the evening ahead. Her professional wardrobe was too conservative, her casual clothes too informal, and the few dressy pieces she owned seemed to scream, trying too hard. Her roommate Sarah knocked on the bedroom door and peeked inside. You look like you're preparing for war instead of a date. It's not a date, Emma said automatically, then paused. Is it a date? When your impossibly hot boss asks you to dinner and tells you to wear something that makes you feel beautiful, it's a date. Sarah stepped into the room and surveyed the clothing carnage. What's got you so twisted up about this? You've been talking about Alexander Kane for weeks. That's exactly the problem. I've been thinking about him too much, and tonight everything changes. After tonight, I can't pretend this is just professional anymore. Sarah pulled a dress from the closet that Emma had forgotten she owned. A deep navy blue silk dress with a simple but elegant cut that skimmed her curves without being overtly sexy. It was sophisticated and understated, purchased for a work event months ago, but never worn. This one, Sarah said decisively. It's perfect for someone who wants to look stunning but doesn't want to appear like she's trying to look stunning. Emma held the dress up to herself in the mirror. It was beautiful, and it made her feel both confident and feminine without crossing into territory that felt unsafe. What if this is a mistake? Emma asked, slipping into the dress. What if I'm risking everything for something that won't last? What if you're missing out on something amazing because you're too scared to find out what it could be? Sarah countered, zipping up the dress. Emma, you've been playing it safe your entire life. Maybe it's time to see what happens when you don't. By 8 o'clock, Emma was ready. The navy dress fit perfectly, paired with simple silver jewelry and heels that were high enough to be elegant, but low enough to walk in comfortably. She had styled her hair in loose waves that fell past her shoulders, and her makeup was understated but polished. When the knock came at her apartment door, Emma's heart began racing all over again. She opened the door to find Alexander Kane in a black suit without a tie, his white shirt open at the collar in a way that was both casual and devastatingly attractive. He looked like he could grace the cover of a magazine. But there was something in his eyes when he saw her that made Emma feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. You look exquisite, he said, his voice low and appreciative. Thank you. You look pretty good yourself. Alexander smiled, and Emma noticed he seemed more relaxed than she had ever seen him at work. Shall we? The car waiting outside was sleek and expensive, with a driver who nodded respectfully to Alexander but said nothing during the ride. Emma found herself studying Alexander's profile as they drove through the city, noting the strong line of his jaw, the way his hair fell slightly over his forehead, the elegant movement of his hands as he gestured while talking. Where are we going? She asked. Somewhere we can talk without being interrupted, Alexander replied, and something in his tone made Emma's pulse quicken. The restaurant was unlike anywhere Emma had ever been. Located on the top floor of a building she didn't recognize, it was small and intimate, with perhaps a dozen tables spread throughout a space that felt more like an elegant apartment than a commercial establishment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the city, and the lighting was soft and golden, creating an atmosphere that felt both sophisticated and romantic. Mr. Kane. The maitre d' greeted them warmly. Your usual table? Yes, thank you, Marcus. They were led to a corner table that offered privacy and the best view in the restaurant. As Emma settled into her chair, she realized that this was clearly a place Alexander came to regularly, somewhere he was known and valued. This is beautiful, she said, looking around at the understated elegance of their surroundings. I thought you might appreciate it. The chef here believes that food should tell a story, much like your approach to marketing. Every dish is designed to evoke a specific emotion or memory. A sommelier appeared with a wine list, but Alexander waved it away. We'll have the Chateau Margaux 2015, he told the man, who nodded and disappeared. You ordered wine without asking what I like, Emma observed, though she wasn't offended. There was something appealing about being with someone who took charge, who made decisions with confidence. I know what you like, Alexander replied, his gray eyes meeting hers across the table. You like things that are complex, that reveal different layers the more attention you pay to them. You appreciate quality, but you're not impressed by flash or ostentation. You want substance. Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks, because his description felt like it applied to more than just her wine preferences. You seem very certain about that. I'm certain about you, Emma. I've been watching you, learning you, since the day you walked into my office. The wine arrived, and the sommelier presented it to Alexander with ceremonial precision. After the tasting ritual, their glasses were filled with deep red wine that smelled of dark fruit and earth and something indefinably expensive. Alexander raised his glass. To authenticity. To authenticity, Emma echoed, though she wasn't entirely sure what they were toasting. The first sip of wine was extraordinary, rich and complex, with flavors that seemed to evolve as she tasted it. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced, and she couldn't help but close her eyes to savor it fully. When she opened them, Alexander was watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. You taste things the way other people listen to music, he observed. With your whole being. Is that how you see everything? In terms of how people experience pleasure. Pleasure is one of the most honest expressions of who we are, Alexander replied. People can lie about their values, their goals, their beliefs. But how they experience pleasure, what they truly enjoy, what makes them feel alive, that's much harder to fake. Emma felt as if they were having two conversations again, the surface one about wine and food, and a deeper one about desire and honesty and the parts of themselves they usually kept hidden. What gives you pleasure? She asked, surprised by her own boldness. Alexander smiled, and there was something predatory about it that made Emma's pulse quicken. Creation, building something from nothing, seeing potential where others see only risk, taking something beautiful and helping it become what it was meant to be. That sounds like you're talking about business. I'm talking about everything. Business, art, relationships, the principle is the same. Most people are afraid of their own potential, afraid to become what they could be. I find great satisfaction in helping them overcome that fear. The first course arrived, something delicate and artistic that Emma couldn't immediately identify, but tasted like the essence of spring. As she ate, she found herself relaxing into the conversation, into Alexander's undivided attention, into the luxury of an evening that had nothing to do with work or goals or proving herself. Tell me about your family, Alexander said as they moved through the meal. There's not much to tell. My parents are good people, very practical. They've been married for 30 years, live in the same house I grew up in. My father works for the Postal Service, my mother teaches elementary school. They're steady, but you're not steady. Emma looked up sharply. What makes you say that? Steady people don't reinvent marketing strategies for luxury hotel chains. They don't take risks on ideas that could fail spectacularly. They don't agree to have dinner with their boss when they know it will complicate their carefully planned life. Emma took another sip of wine, considering his words. Maybe I'm tired of being steady. What would happen if you stopped being steady? What would you do if you could do anything without consequences? The question hung between them, and Emma realized this was another test, Another invitation to be honest about parts of herself she usually kept hidden. I would travel, she said slowly, thinking out loud. Not tourist travel, but really experiencing places, understanding how other people live and what they value. I would write, maybe about the stories behind brands and businesses. She paused, looking out at the city lights below them. I would stop being afraid of wanting things. What things? Emma met his eyes across the table, and something in her chest fluttered at the intensity of his gaze. I would stop being afraid of wanting someone to choose me. Not because I'm safe or convenient or fit into their life plan, but because they can't imagine being without me. And what would you give someone who chose you like that? The question was intimate, loaded with implications that made Emma's mouth go dry. Everything, she whispered, then caught herself. You mean everything, Alexander said softly. You mean you would give yourself completely to someone who valued that gift properly? Emma stared at him, feeling exposed and understood in equal measure. Yes, Emma, Alexander said, and her name in his voice sounded like a caress. I need you to understand something about tonight. What? This isn't casual for me. I don't take employees to dinner. I don't make personal overtures to women who work for me. And I don't invest time in people unless I see something extraordinary in them. Emma's heart began racing again. What are you saying? I'm saying that I recognized something in you the first day we met, something that I've been thinking about every day since. You're not just an employee to me, Emma. You haven't been from the beginning. Then what am I? Alexander leaned forward, his gray eyes intense and unwavering. You're a possibility I never expected to find. You're intelligent and passionate and brave, but you're also innocent in a way that has nothing to do with experience and everything to do with the way you see the world. Emma felt heat flood through her at his words. I don't understand what you want from me. I want you to trust me. I want you to let me show you what it feels like to stop being careful, to stop protecting yourself from feeling too much. Alexander's voice was low, hypnotic. I want you to discover what you're capable of when you stop holding back. The words hung in the air between them, and Emma felt as if she were standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down into something vast and unknowable. Every rational part of her brain was screaming warnings about workplace relationships, about the power imbalance between them, about the danger of getting involved with someone like Alexander Kane. But underneath the fear was something else, a hunger she had never allowed herself to acknowledge, a desire to know what it would feel like to surrender control to someone strong enough to handle it. This could ruin everything, she said quietly, or it could be the beginning of everything. Alexander reached across the table and took her hand, and Emma felt electricity shoot through her at the contact. His fingers were warm and strong, and the simple touch felt more intimate than anything she had experienced in her previous relationships. I'm not asking you to decide tonight, Alexander said. I'm asking you to consider the possibility that what you've been waiting for your whole life might not look like what you expected it to look like. Emma stared down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. Alexander Kane was dangerous in every way that mattered. He was powerful, commanding, and saw through every defense she had ever constructed. But he was also the first person who had ever made her feel truly seen, truly understood. What happens next? She asked. That depends on what you want to happen next. Emma woke the next morning feeling as if she were inhabiting someone else's life. Everything in her apartment looked the same, but she felt fundamentally different, as if dinner with Alexander had awakened parts of herself she hadn't known existed. She found herself moving through her morning routine with new awareness, noticing the way silk felt against her skin, the way coffee tasted when she actually paid attention, the way sunlight streaming through her window seemed brighter and more golden than usual. At work, Emma tried to maintain professional normalcy, but she was hyper-aware of Alexander's presence in the building. Every time someone approached her desk, she felt a flutter of anticipation that it might be him. When she saw him across the office floor, talking with other executives or reviewing reports, she found herself studying his movements, the confident way he carried himself, the authority he commanded without effort. Their first direct interaction came during the mid-morning marketing meeting. Alexander attended, as he sometimes did when major campaigns were being discussed, and Emma felt his attention on her like a physical touch. When she presented updates on several projects, he asked insightful questions that pushed her thinking further, but there was something in his tone, a warmth and approval that felt personal rather than merely professional. After the meeting, as Emma gathered her materials, Alexander approached her desk. "Walk with me," he said quietly, and it wasn't a request. They moved toward the elevators together, and Emma was acutely conscious of the other employees watching them. She wondered if anyone could see the tension between them, if their dynamic was as obvious to others as it felt to her. Alexander pressed the button for the executive floor, and as the elevator rose, Emma felt her pulse quicken. "How are you feeling about last night?" he asked, his voice low and intimate in the enclosed space. Confused, Emma admitted. "Everything feels different, but I can't tell if that's good or terrifying." "Both," Alexander said, turning to face her fully. "Change is always both." The elevator opened onto the executive floor, and Alexander led her down a hallway she had never seen before, past offices that were larger and more luxurious than anything on her floor. He stopped at a door at the end of the hall and used a key card to open it. "This is a private meeting room," he explained as they entered. "We won't be interrupted here." The room was elegant but comfortable, with a small conference table, several leather chairs, and windows that offered a view of the city. Alexander closed the door behind them, and suddenly, Emma was very aware that they were completely alone. "Emma," Alexander said, moving closer to her, "I want to discuss what happens next." "What do you mean?" "Last night, you said you wanted to find out what you're capable of when you stop holding back. I want to help you discover that, but I need you to understand what that means." Emma felt her breath catch as Alexander stepped closer, near enough that she could smell his cologne, could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. "What does it mean?" "It means trusting me to know what you need, even when you don't know it yourself. It means being honest about what you want, even when it scares you. It means letting me take care of you in ways you've never let anyone take care of you before." The words sent heat coursing through Emma's body, because they spoke to desires she had never allowed herself to acknowledge. "I don't know how to do that." "I know. That's why you need someone to teach you." Alexander reached out and touched her face, his thumb tracing along her cheek in a gesture so tender that Emma felt tears prick at her eyes. "You've spent your whole life taking care of yourself, being strong, being independent. But strength isn't about never needing anyone, Emma. Sometimes it's about being brave enough to surrender control to someone worthy of that trust. And you think you're worthy of that trust?" "I know I am. The question is whether you're brave enough to find out." Emma stared up at him, feeling as if her entire future hung on this moment. Everything she had believed about herself, about what she wanted, about the kind of relationship she should have, was being challenged by this man who saw through every defense she had ever constructed. "What would it look like?" she whispered. "If I said yes, it would mean that when we're together, I make the decisions. Not because you're incapable, but because you trust me to know what's best for both of us. It would mean being honest with me about everything, your fears, your desires, your needs. It would mean accepting that I will push you beyond what feels safe, because that's where growth happens." Emma felt her heart racing as she processed his words. "That sounds like you're talking about more than just a relationship." "I am talking about more than just a relationship. I'm talking about transformation. About helping you become the woman you're meant to be instead of the woman you think you should be." Alexander moved even closer, and Emma felt the wall behind her back, realized he had somehow maneuvered her there without her noticing. She was trapped between his body and the wall, but instead of feeling claustrophobic, she felt safe in a way she had never experienced before. "Emma," Alexander said softly, "I want you to be mine. Not as a possession, but as a gift freely given. I want to take care of you, protect you, challenge you, and help you discover pleasures you never imagined possible." The words sent shock waves through Emma's system, because they named desires she had buried so deeply she had almost convinced herself they didn't exist. I don't have experience with this kind of thing." "I know. That's part of what makes you so precious." Alexander leaned down and pressed his forehead against hers, and Emma felt as if the whole world had narrowed to this moment, this connection between them. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I know. But I won't let anything bad happen to you. Trust me with your fear, Emma." Let me show you what it feels like to be cherished. Emma looked up into his eyes and saw something there that took her breath away, not just desire, but genuine care, a tenderness that seemed to wrap around her like a warm embrace. This wasn't just about control or power. This was about being seen, being valued, being cared for in a way that felt both overwhelming and perfect. Okay, she whispered, the word coming out on a breath. Something shifted in Alexander's expression, a satisfaction and possessiveness that made Emma's knees weak. Say it clearly, Emma. Tell me what you want. I want you to take care of me. I want to be yours. Alexander's smile was triumphant and tender at the same time. Then, you're mine, he said simply, and Emma felt something inside her chest settle into place, as if a puzzle piece had finally found its proper position. Alexander stepped back slightly, and Emma immediately missed his proximity. We need to establish some ground rules. Ground rules, boundaries, expectations, ways to ensure we both get what we need from this arrangement. Alexander's tone had shifted slightly, becoming more businesslike, but no less warm. First, and most importantly, this stays between us during work hours. I won't compromise your professional reputation or put you in an uncomfortable position with your colleagues. Emma nodded, relieved that he had thought of this concern. Second, when we're together outside of work, I make the decisions about where we go, what we do, how we spend our time. You can express preferences, but ultimately, I choose what's best for us. What if I disagree with your choice? Then, we'll discuss it, and I'll explain my reasoning. But, Emma, part of what you need to learn is how to trust someone else's judgment, how to let go of the need to control every aspect of your life. The idea was both terrifying and oddly appealing. Emma had been making her own decisions for so long that the thought of letting someone else take that responsibility felt like the most luxurious gift imaginable. Third, honesty. Complete honesty. If you're scared, if you're uncomfortable, if you want something, if you need something, you tell me. I can't take care of you if I don't know what you need. And what do you need from me? Alexander's gray eyes darkened. I need your trust. I need you to surrender control willingly, not because you're forced to, but because you choose to. I need you to let me see all of you, not just the polished, professional version you show the world. Emma felt heat flood through her at the intensity in his voice. I don't know if I know how to do that. That's what I'm here for. To teach you, to guide you, to help you discover parts of yourself you never knew existed. Alexander moved closer again, and Emma felt her breathing become shallow. Are you ready to start now? Start what? Learning to trust me. Learning to let go of control. Emma nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure what she was agreeing to. Close your eyes, Alexander said softly. Emma hesitated for a moment, then let her eyes drift shut. Immediately, her other senses became heightened. She could hear Alexander's breathing, could smell his cologne, could feel the warmth radiating from his body. What do you feel? He asked, his voice close to her ear. Nervous. Excited. Safe. Good. Now I want you to focus only on my voice, only on what I'm telling you. Can you do that? Yes. You're beautiful, Emma. Not just physically, though you are stunning, but beautiful in your honesty, in your willingness to be vulnerable. You've been hiding this part of yourself for so long, but you don't have to hide anymore. Emma felt tears prick at her eyes, because his words touched something deep inside her that had been waiting her whole life to be acknowledged. You can open your eyes, Alexander said gently. When Emma looked at him, she saw something in his expression that made her heart skip. Possession, yes, but also reverence, as if she were something precious that he intended to protect and cherish. How do you feel? Different, Emma said honestly. Like something has shifted inside me. That's surrender beginning, Alexander explained. The first step toward discovering who you really are when you stop trying to be who you think you should be. Alexander checked his watch, and Emma realized they had been in the private meeting room for much longer than a typical business discussion would warrant. We should get back, he said. But, Emma, tonight I want you to come to my apartment. We'll have dinner, and we'll continue this conversation in a more appropriate setting. Emma felt her pulse quicken at the implication. Okay, I'll have a car pick you up at 7. Or something comfortable, something that makes you feel feminine. As they left the private meeting room, Emma felt as if she were walking in a dream. Everything looked the same, but she felt fundamentally altered. She had just agreed to something that would change her life completely, had committed herself to a man who promised to transform her in ways she couldn't even imagine. The rest of the workday passed in a blur. Emma went through the motions of her responsibilities, but her mind was entirely focused on the evening ahead. She felt nervous and excited and terrified in equal measure, aware that she was about to cross a threshold that would make retreat impossible. When 7 o'clock came, Emma was waiting outside her apartment building wearing a soft cashmere sweater and jeans that made her feel both comfortable and attractive. When the car arrived, another expensive sedan with a discreet driver, she felt her heart begin racing all over again. As they drove through the city toward Alexander's apartment, Emma stared out the window and tried to process what was happening to her. 3 weeks ago, she had been a single woman focused on her career, waiting for the right kind of safe, predictable love to find her. Tonight, she was on her way to surrender herself to a man who promised to teach her desires she had never allowed herself to acknowledge. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, as the car pulled up to an elegant building in the most expensive part of the city, Emma felt a sense of rightness, as if she were finally stepping into the life she was meant to live. Alexander was waiting for her in the lobby, and when he smiled at her, Emma felt her heart skip. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. "Ready," she replied, and meant it completely. As they rode the elevator to his apartment, Emma knew that whatever happened next would change her forever. She was about to discover what it meant to truly belong to someone, what it felt like to surrender control to someone strong enough to handle that gift. For the first time in her life, Emma was exactly where she was supposed to be. Emma took a deep breath, feeling as if she were about to jump off that cliff. "I want to find out what I'm capable of when I stop holding back." Alexander's smile was triumphant and tender at the same time. "Then, we'll find out together." As they finished their dinner, Emma felt as if she were becoming someone new, someone braver and more honest than the woman who had walked into the restaurant a few hours earlier. She was still scared, still aware that she was risking everything she had worked for. But, for the first time in her life, the possibility of what she might gain felt more important than what she might lose. When Alexander walked her to her door that night, he didn't try to kiss her or come inside. Instead, he simply told her she was beautiful, told her to think about what they had discussed, and promised to see her tomorrow. Emma went to sleep that night knowing that her life had changed irrevocably. She had glimpsed a version of herself that was bolder, more passionate, more willing to risk everything for the possibility of something extraordinary. And she knew that there was no going back. "Okay," she said, the word coming out in a rush before she could change her mind. Something flashed in Alexander's eyes, triumph, perhaps, or relief. "I'll pick you up at 8. You don't know where I live. I'll find out." His smile was confident in a way that should have been arrogant, but instead felt like a promise. "Where's something that makes you feel beautiful?" As Alexander left the conference room, Emma sank into one of the chairs, her heart racing. She had just agreed to have dinner with the most dangerous man she had ever met, a man who saw through every defense she had carefully constructed over the years. For the first time in her adult life, Emma was about to do something that had nothing to do with her plan and everything to do with what she wanted. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. She spent the rest of the day in a daze, barely able to focus on work as her mind kept returning to the evening ahead. Every rational part of her brain was screaming that this was a mistake, that she was risking her career and her carefully planned future for something that might be nothing more than sophisticated seduction. But underneath the fear was something else, excitement like she had never felt before. Alexander Kane had awakened something in her that couldn't be reasoned away or planned around. For the first time in her life, Emma was about to follow her desires rather than her strategies. As 5 o'clock approached, she found herself staring at her reflection in the ladies' room mirror, trying to understand the woman looking back at her. She looked the same as she had that morning, but something fundamental had changed. The careful, controlled person she had been was making room for someone braver, someone willing to risk safety for the possibility of something extraordinary. Emma left work that evening knowing that whatever happened at dinner, there would be no going back to the person she had been. Alexander Kane had seen through her defenses, had called her bluff about wanting stability over excitement. Tonight, she would find out what it felt like to stop hiding from herself. Be careful going home. It's late. As Emma left his office, she felt shaken by the interaction. Alexander Kane was dangerous in ways she hadn't anticipated when she first walked into his office. He wasn't just attractive or powerful. He saw her in a way that made her want to be seen, and that was the most dangerous thing of all. That weekend, Emma found herself thinking about his question, "What do you desire?" It should have been easy to answer. She wanted career success, financial security, eventually the right relationship, and a family. But underneath those safe, socially acceptable goals, Emma realized there were desires she had never allowed herself to acknowledge. She wanted to feel alive in a way she never had. She wanted to stop being afraid of making mistakes, of taking risks, of wanting things that weren't sensible or safe. She wanted to know what it felt like to be chosen, truly chosen, by someone who saw all of her and wanted her anyway. And, increasingly, she wanted to know what it would feel like to surrender control to someone strong enough to handle it. As she prepared for the Morrison presentation, Emma tried to push these thoughts aside. But Alexander Kane had awakened something in her that couldn't easily be put back to sleep. For the first time in her adult life, Emma found herself questioning whether the careful path she had chosen was really what she wanted, or simply what she had convinced herself was safe. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating, and Emma knew that whatever happened with the Morrison account, her life was already changing in ways she couldn't control. The way he had looked at her, the questions he had asked, the way he seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed walls, it all left her feeling exposed and exhilarated in equal measure. She thought about her carefully planned life, her determination to wait for the right man, the promise she had made to herself about love and relationships. Alexander Kane represented everything she had always been careful to avoid: power, complexity, danger. But as she settled at her new desk and tried to focus on the materials Patricia had provided, she couldn't shake the feeling that her carefully ordered world had just been turned completely upside down. And somewhere deep inside, in a place she didn't want to examine too closely, she found herself looking forward to seeing what would happen next.